Fala pessoal, Eric aqui. Hoje eu vou trocar uma ideia aqui com o Travis Gafford, né, um cara que já cobre aí o cenário de League of Legends há muito tempo, inclusive me inspirei bastante no trabalho dele quando eu comecei também. So Travis, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I was telling people that like you are one of the guys that I inspire when I start like covering esports, you know?
I'm honored to hear that. I mean, I think you've been very successful for yourself. So, yeah, happy to chat with you today.
Thank you very much. So, like, I want to talk with you about like LCS right now. Like, people here in Brazil, we are talking more about LCS this split. We have like Double Elite coming back, and also like Baiano, one of the biggest League of Legends streamer. He was like watching LCS without the image, like just like
Yeah.
watching and
Doing like
talking about it.
co-viewing. Yeah.
Yeah, and he has like a really great audience. So more people here in Brazil was like start watching LCS, and we saw a lot of things going on recently. Uh, so one of the things I want to talk with you like to start is about how do you see like the viewership, you know? I saw like a Jacob Wolf article like this week, I think, and he shows that like in 2018 LCS has like 200k, and right now is like 100k. It's kind of crazy. How do you see this?
Yeah. I mean, I think the viewership is really spooky. As somebody, I mean, I consider myself a fan of the LCS, and seeing the viewership go down to where it is right now is not great. I think the schedule change that Riot made for Thursday and Friday, I don't think was helpful, because when I look at the broadcast, personally, I believe it's gotten a lot better over the course of spring. They've been doing a great job with the content. The storylines have been great. We've had a lot of very competitive teams, some surprising upsets. Golden Guardians making it to the finals is
Yeah,
just absolutely wild.
I wouldn't expect that.
Yes, I mean nobody did. So I I personally feel that as a fan of the LCS, it's been a great time to watch it. And so when I ask myself, why is it that viewership has been eroding, it certainly feels like the schedule change was not beneficial, and in fact, actively damaging to viewership. That being said, I do think that, while viewership is going down and that is concerning, the league is still sustainable and still functional, right? Like, sponsorship is still there. The viewership is still some of the best that you can get in esports, even if I heard CB overtook it recently,
Yeah.
as a viewed league. So I am not of the opinion that LCS is gone, next year or something. I think there's a lot of doom and gloom. I think there is still time to turn stuff around, but Riot needs to get moving on that.
Yeah, and also I want to ask you about like the schedule change it, and we have like the Valorant happening, and like NA is way better on Valorant than League of Legends. The same for Brazil. We are
Yeah.
way better, and I don't know if you see that this is something that hurts a little bit. Like people start wanting to watch more Valorant, and I don't know, maybe right just put like Valorant with more like the prime time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Valorant succeeding hurts LCS, but I do think the decision to make sure that these things can't run at the same time because they're in the same space, you both using the studio, I think that that is a rough situation for the LCS. And it certainly hurts the LCS because now if they decide that the schedule doesn't work as well, they can't move it back. There is the conflict. They would have to figure out another venue or another space to hold either VCT or LCS. I also think that, a lot of people looking at how Valorant is doing is not necessarily representative of how LCS is doing, right? Because LCS and CBLOL are in separate leagues, right? Whereas in VCT Americas, it's all grouped together. So it is very much like if you combined LCS and CBLOL viewership and all that stuff. So I don't think it's a correct or it's a direct one to one, but yeah, I do think it is a little worrying to see how stuck LCS is now on weekdays because Val has that studio.
And like you said about like storylines during the split, etc. And like here in Brazil, like I saw some people talking about LCS, etc. And I remember like a comment that someone was saying that LCS got so many imports that this is something that make kind of more hard, like harder, sorry, like harder to make like storylines, and I don't know, like the sense of belonging, like for people, like things like that. Like, what do you think about that?
So yeah, there's a lot of discussion that goes on about imports and like, hey, can you connect as well to a person from another country as you can somebody from your own? And I think the answer is sometimes. You know, Riot does not do a great job, and none of us do a great job, I think, of having a lot of translators available to create content with these folks. And so sometimes, if I'm doing one of my tests, I will just have to choose the player who speaks English because I might not have a translator available to help me translate, or maybe if we're using the team manager who can translate, it doesn't always work as well. And so, anybody who is saying that like there are no additional obstacles is being unfair and unreasonable. That being said, I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for players who have been around for a while and who put the effort in for fans to connect with them. Berserker is a great example of this, where I think fans have been really excited about him. Prince showed up and within the first couple of weeks was doing amazing interviews in English, was very funny, very charismatic, had this great moment where he talked about how Doublelift was his idol and looked up to him, and they did a roster swap.
The t-shirt, the jersey, sorry,
yes.
the jersey exchange.
The jersey swap. Yes. And so to act as though that's not a possibility is, I think, a little unfair. The big thing that I focus in on is the culture around importing players in the LCS actually has an issue when it comes to keeping players in the league. So I care less about, okay, does this person speak English? And I care more about, will this person be here for very long? So Team Liquid is a great example of that, where you had them saying like, hey, everyone should care about impact. And then it was everyone should care about Alphari. Then it was everyone should care about Whippo. Then it was, or this split, it's all about Summit. And so whenever you have players that enter the league and leave the league so frequently, which is part of the import thing, that actually I think is a bit of an issue. Because if you had a player that came over and they stayed long enough, they learned the language, they create content, and fans could like track their career, that's great. But with Immortals, they're bringing Treats back. Treats was here previously. You end up with this thing that I call the boomerang, right? Where like a player comes to the LCS, then they leave, then they maybe come back again, then they leave, and you never have a chance to really build something sustainable with them. So that is my bigger concern. It's less about bringing players from other regions. It's more about, okay, if this player's coming over, are they going to continue to stay in the league, or are they going to leave shortly thereafter?
Yeah, like I was talking with someone before, and like my friend, he told me like about like Bjergsen, for example, like he's Danish, and he said, so like Bjergsen is like one of the biggest LCS stars, but he's Danish. But I see like Bjergsen as a guy that went to LCS and he became like an LCS player, right? This is
right.
Something that you're talking, right?
Yes, exactly. Right. Like whenever a player comes over and they stay for a while, they can connect with the audience if they make the effort to. I think it's tough when the broadcast is like, no, everyone care about Perks. Perks is crazy. Perks, Perks, Perks. And he's here for 1 year and then he leaves. Like how are players and fans are ever going to be able to gain attachment to these stars over time whenever they're just in and out of the league? I also think that it does, like, I think a little bit about Revenge, who was the top laner for Immortals for a while. It just got announced that he became a free agent. And I wonder if Team Liquid had not spent time trying to bring over Alphari and Whippo and Summit, and instead had said like, hey, Revenge has already shown potential as a top laner. Maybe we could bring him up into our system and he would get really good. And then we have a situation where this North American player who's been in the system for a while that people have been kind of aware of, now he's on a top team, he starts performing well. and he's not going to necessarily leave, right? And so you end up in a situation where not only do you have players that are rotating in and out, but you also create a bit of a barrier for some of these players who could be potentially much better if they could just get on like a good team. They never get a chance to. So it's definitely something I spent a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, like here in Brazil, I remember when like BRTT retired. For us was like, okay, like BRTT just retired, and we are. I said sometimes that we are kind of addicted to like do BRTT content all the time.
Yes.
Because works, you know, like, and you just be like doing BRTT content, and so he's gone. Okay, and what about now? And at the time I was thinking like how like Riot should like try to like make more heroes, etc. You know, and also me as media, and at the same time for the teams as well, etc. Do you see like something similar happened with LCS? You know, like with a lot of people retiring.
1,000%. 1,000% with Bjergsen and Double Lift, there was a bit of an addiction, and when they left, there was a huge gap, and then now they're back, and it's kind of this awkward situation where then Bjergsen leaves again, and so yeah, I mean, you like part of the reason BRTT was so popular in Brazil, besides being a very charismatic person, is like he'd played for a very long time, and he'd had this story, and there was the BRTT greater than Double Lift stuff, and all these
Yeah.
memes that came out, right? If a player comes to the league and they only play for like a year and then they leave to go back to Europe or Korea or China and play in their domestic league, there's never a chance for that sort of story and that narrative and these stars to be built again. And so then you end up leaning even heavier onto the BRTTs and the Doubles and the Bjergsen. So I think that's a huge problem for the league, and I'm disappointed that there's not been more done to address it.
Yeah, like for us here, as I saw was when like for example BRTT retired, I could take like we start taking more look for other players that they were
Yes.
already like doing something great, you know. And I don't know if
Yes.
happened the same like Impact, as you said, for example, he has been like an LCS for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are players that have been in the league that have been overshadowed, but again, I think sometimes that's overshadowed because we spend so much time hyping up the new players that come over, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, that one year where we had Alfari and Perks and Sword Art, so much of the marketing and promotion was put into, hey, it's Alfari, Perks, and Sword Art, and the teams are hyping them up, and the league is hyping them up, and I'm hyping them up. And when you're doing that, you're not talking about Impact as much, you're talking about Alfari. So I think, yeah, it's been a bit of an issue for sure.
Yeah. Like for we finish, like important topic as well. Like we saw that some, like there is a report that some teams are trying to like sell their spots. There is like a TSM situation going on right now. A CLG like just also like sold their spot. How do you see these as well? You know, like this money thing around like LCS.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things here. One, we just are in a tough economic situation, right? In the US, we are, depending on who you talk to, we're either about to be in a recession or we're already in a recession. And all these companies are acting as if it's really tough times. And so it's hard to, even in my business, I've had a harder time getting sponsors this year just because of the way that it is. And so I think a lot of the teams are just facing financial tightness. On the other hand, I think a lot of these teams spent outside their means for a very long time. They were all these big stories about all these players getting signed for so much money and these huge buyouts and all this stuff. And there was not much evidence at the time that viewership was going to dramatically increase or that sponsorship revenue was going to dramatically increase. And so I think the teams did not always do the best job of spending what they should have, and you ended up in kind of an arms race where like, oh, that team is spending so much money on getting that player, I got to go do that, and they start to damage themselves. And so I am not surprised that we have gotten to this point, even if I'm very sad to see teams like CLG that are just not going to be brands anymore in the space. But my hope is that, enough of this is happening where, for instance, when energy comes in to the space, they have CLG spot, they will hopefully not make the same mistakes that CLG made. Though FlyQuest is certainly spending a lot of money, so I don't know. Maybe they have not learned, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the challenge right now for the league, for sure.
Yeah, do you think like the league can be more sustainable after like this time, you know?
I think so. I mean, Riot announced today, they put out their blog post. I don't know if you saw it yet, about how they're going to try to create additional revenue for the teams, and they're trying to help make sure that the teams can weather all this stuff. And then, so I think you could end up in a situation where, as long as viewership in the LCS just stops degrading, which is a big if, we have to make sure that it doesn't keep plummeting. But if LCS viewership stops getting bad, and teams stop spending as much and revenue increases, the league's going to be fine. So we'll see how things go over the next 2 or 3 years, but I don't think it's dead yet.
Okay, so Travis, thank you very much. It was really nice.
Of course,
to talk
thank
with
you. Yeah, very good to talk to you too. Hopefully I get to see you at MSI.
Yeah, yeah.